Welcome back to the Autoblog Podcast. I'm Greg Migliore. Joining me today is senior editor for All Things Green, John Snyder. What's going on, man?
Hey, just enjoying this winter wonderland we've got here.
Winter water wonderland, according to the plates from 1964 that are back, and you're seeing them on the road.
Yeah, I just got one for my 74 Beetle.
I'm going to get one for my 2017 Acadia, just because they're awesome. I remember these plates. Yeah. They were in my parents' garage because we never threw out a license plate, or really anything for that matter. And I came across one and I was like, these are great. So they're sort of like the ones you don't remember. If you remember Michigan plates, you think of the blue and white ones, or all these other ones we've had since then. These are kind of like the throwback ones that, from the 50s and 60s that you may or might not, recall. They're very cool. Let's bring in road test editor Zach Palmer. You're talking about buying a car. Are you going to get these plates?
Yeah, 100% getting these plates for my Integra. They will be on there as soon as I probably go to renew my registration. I really, really love the way they look.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm sure they're going to look great on your Beetle, John. I'm excited to see it.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of throwback uniforms and sports. I know you guys are both somewhat sports fans. I love it when a football team shows up with or a hockey team with random unis from who knows when. So I think it's a really cool look.
Or even when Coke has their throwback can, Coke or Pepsi has their throwback cans, or Miller Lite, and those are so sweet.
Miller Lite just went back to their old cans. I think that's what they've been doing, right? They, they're just. That's what they were, which I think is a great move. Go back to the classic look. The Pepsi can is very, when you see that true retro one from the 20s, the 1920s with the script, that's a throwback. And they didn't use it for very long. It's very roaring 20s, if you will.
Hey, we're in the roaring 20s right now.
That's true. 2 years into it.
Maybe again. The crawling 20s. I don't know.
I don't know what this is. This is crazy. The groundhog did see a shadow, so that means 6 more weeks of winter. I did not realize that it was only 6 weeks. In mid-March, were you guys expecting some big thaw around here? I always thought it was a better deal, but so it goes. Anyways, we should probably talk about some cars, right? And we do have a loaded show for you guys. We're going to talk about the Kia EV6. John drove that last week. The NSX Type-S. Zach drove that last week. We have a new long-termer. It's the BMW 330e. We're psyched about that. I think that's going to be a great addition to our long-term fleet. It replaces the Acura TLX and sort of Type S, which we had probably almost as long as we did the A-Spec. So there we go. And then we will get into the Explorer Timberline. And if we have time, we'll talk about the Kia Sorento Hybrid. We'll run through some news on the Alfa Romeo Tonale, which is going to be revealed on February 8th. And then the Aston Martin DBX707. Finally, we'll close things up. We happen to usually talk about, if one of the podcast hosts did a column that week, and that happens to be me. So we'll get into that. It's a different one. I talk about the American Motors headquarters, which, believe it or not, is still standing for now. So let's get right into it here. EV6. I drove the Hyundai version of this, the Ioniq 5. So have you, John.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of differences here, though, between the two cars. To me, this is definitely Kia's take on the EV segment, from the styling to just the overall execution. But some of the hardware is pretty similar. So what did you think of this thing?
Just like the Ioniq 5, I thought it was an absolute blast to drive. I didn't get to drive the rear-wheel drive Ioniq, but I got to drive the rear drive EV6. And while it's not quite as fast as the all-wheel drive version, the dual motor version, it's still plenty quick, 0 to 67 seconds, about there. And it's really fun. It's still, if you jab the accelerator mid-corner, the rear end will break loose on you, and it's really fun. The styling is a lot different inside and out, which I think is great to have both of those options. I think they both look good in their own right. It's the big difference between these is a lot of it's just going to be personal taste. I personally like the lounge-like interior of the Ioniq, and I really like the sort of RoboCop looks to the Ioniq. The EV6 is a little more conventional, and actually I think it looks a little more sporty, inside and out. It's got more of a driver-focused cockpit. But yeah, they're both really great EVs. I would be happy buying either one of them. One huge advantage for the EV6 is that it will be available in all 50 states right off the bat. The Hyundai is only available in 18 states to start. The ZEV states plus a few more. And Kia is committed to getting at least one EV6 in each of its, I think, 750 dealerships in the US by the Super Bowl. They've got a Super Bowl spot, so they're sort of trying to organize everything around that. So yeah, you're going to be more likely to see one of these at your local dealership, and probably more likely to see it on your roads if you don't live in one of the zero emission states. So yeah, I think that's a huge win for Kia there. I know the two companies are, they're both Hyundai Group, but they're both very competitive against one another. Always looking to outdo the other in whatever way they can. So that's a point for Kia. But I mean, you can't go wrong with either of these. They're both way bigger than they look. The Ioniq is actually, the wheelbase is 3 inches longer than the Palisade, and the EV6 is the same as the Telluride. So it's a little bit shorter wheelbase, a little bit less room inside the EV6, but still very spacious. Able to sit behind myself, 6 foot tall, have the seat back, and then sit behind my own seat. And it's perfectly comfortable. Yeah, I really like both of these vehicles quite a bit. But yeah, the EV6 has more sort of conventional styling. The Kia inside has a really funky interior. I mean, the Ioniq has a really sort of funky interior, sort of minimalist in its styling. You don't see the Hyundai logo everywhere, or basically anywhere. They use these little pixels. There's just like 4 little embossed pixels on the steering wheel in the Ioniq. But the EV6, it looks like a sports car inside. Yeah, both very fun, and just really goes to show that their electric vehicle packaging is superb, and I'm really excited to see what both of these companies are doing in the future.
Do they have a plan for any sort of like home chargers, or any sort of like, help, either like through an app or something for the infrastructure? Like if you, like Ford does with the Ford Pass, to help you get to the charging infrastructure? Do they have anything like that?
So the Ioniq 5, that's an advantage for the Ioniq 5, is they have 3 years of free 30-minute charging sessions at Electrify America. The Kia EV6 offers, I think, 1,000 kilowatt hours of charging at Electrify America, and for free, and then you pay after that. So that's less than 20 charges from 10 to 80%. But either car, if you can find a capable charger, 350 kilowatt charger, it'll do that very, very quickly, 10 to 80% in something like 18 minutes. So very, very quick charging if the infrastructure is there. The EV6, I know the first edition, which sold out very quickly, and I think there was maybe like something like 1,700 units sold. They offered a choice of free Electrify America charging, a free home charger or an Apple Watch if you weren't going to use either of those. Most people chose the home charger. I think, that's the reality of the situation is most people charge at home. They don't really have something in place for a home charger program or discount that they mentioned. They said they might have something in the works in the future. So we'll see what comes of that. But that's the state of it so far.
So my main question with the EV6 and Ioniq 5, say I'm an enthusiast looking at both of these. You say they're both pretty fun to drive.
Yeah.
Which just on driving dynamics alone, which one would you go for? Is it more fun to drive the Ioniq or is the EV6 the better enthusiast EV, you think?
It depends on what you're looking for. I feel like the Ioniq was a little more pinned down, a little more stable. The EV6 has that slightly shorter wheelbase. It was a little more playful, but a little more rambunctious. It would get a little looser, a little more play in the suspension. But I mean, either one was really happy to carve corners and power out of them, and they're both equally quick. So yeah, a lot of it I think is a matter of personal taste more than driving dynamics. You're not really missing out on much if you choose one over the other in that regard.
Do you have a preference as far as the looks of either car?
I personally really dig the looks of the Ioniq 5. I know it's a little more polarizing because it's just so weird, but I tend to like weird looking cars. I think the EV6 is maybe a little sexier. It's sportier looking. It's swoopier. It's got that, that chunky body with the raked back windshield and the sloping roof line and, prominent spoilers and those. It's got, cooler looking wheels, sportier looking wheels. And they both have really neat headlights, but the headlights on the EV6 are those sort of angled, sort of sharp looking things. While on the Ioniq 5, they're those weird pixel lights, which I think are cool too. But yeah, that's what I think of those.
Sounds good. I am super excited to drive the, excuse me, the EV6. The Ioniq 5 was maybe top 10 of most interesting things I drove last fall. And I thought last year was a really good year for just like new cars, new vehicle launches. There was just so much interesting stuff out there. A lot of things that I think I'll still be talking about, 5-10 years from now. Whereas, 18, 19, I don't know. I don't feel like there was many significant launches. Whereas, maybe there was some holdover from 20, got pushed into 21. Either way, there was a lot of cool stuff. And the Ioniq 5 was one of them. And the EV6 is, it's on my short list of things I'm pretty excited to get into, early this year, I hope.
Yeah, you'll enjoy it. I guarantee it.
All right. Sounds good. So that is the EV6. Any other thoughts on that? How was the food? How was the trip?
We were in wine country.
Okay.
The food was, it was just sort of, fresh California, lots of veggies and stuff, which is my jam. But the roads were fantastic. We went through Sonoma County and into Napa County and Mendocino County and around Clear Lake. Just lots of really, really curvy mountain roads where you could really, I was flogging this thing. And then you see the locals in their pickups so that they could drive these roads blind. And so they're bombing them and you're, trying to keep pace with them. And yeah, it was fun and memorable. Really, really beautiful roads over there. That's one thing I miss about being out there is driving those roads.
Definitely. It's a great place to spend really any amount of time for that matter. So, Zach, meanwhile, was on the other side of the country in Florida, the Rolex 24. Super jealous. I've actually never been to that in my over the course of my career. but you were down there to drive the NSX Type-S, which you got to do. It was at Daytona, right? I would assume that's where you got to drive it.
Correct. It was at the racetrack itself.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So we've all probably driven Type-S models, and I think we've all driven the NSX, right?
Yeah.
What do you put this all together here? Like, what kind of sandwich did this make?
I think it was honestly one of the coolest things I've ever done, like, period. So we got to drive Daytona at night with the NSX Type-S. I mean, if you want to look at bucket list type things, that any sort of racing enthusiast might want to do one day, this is right there. I mean, it's hard to find more of an iconic track in the US than Daytona is. I mean, maybe you can make an argument for Laguna Seca, but this is a very, very special track, and like you said, it's tied to a very special event. So I was down there, I drove it on the track, and then just hours later, I got to see 24 hours of racing at the Rolex 24 take to that very track. So it was actually very enlightening to be able to be on that track and then know what all of those drivers were going through for the next 24 hours. I don't know, the best way to describe the experience might just be like a quick trip through the lap itself. Like, going out, you pull out a pit lane, there's the wall of champions right there, and it's a lot closer than it looks on TV. It's a very, very tight corner, but then you're out onto the track, and we had Ryan Eversley, who is a Honda factory driver, out there doing lead follow with us. So he was not taking it slow, which I very much appreciated. So we got to properly experience it out there. But the infield goes by in a flash, and then you're up onto the banking. The actual oval itself, you have NASCAR 1 is the first corner, NASCAR 2 is the exit of the first corner. And I don't know that there's really anything that can prepare you for what it feels like to be up on a banking. But Daytona's it's really, really steep. It's a 31-degree banking. And obviously we're driving the NSX Type-S, so this is a very, very fast car. We power up out of there and we're going plus 130, 140 really, really quickly. And it was just wild because we had just been sitting like the entire day, just watching cars go by. And then all of a sudden we're doing 140 miles per hour on the banking of Daytona. And it's just one of those moments where I feel like you got to pinch yourself. And then you're braking super hard for the bus stop chicane, which is wild because that's one of the darkest places on the entire track, and it's the place where you brake from the highest speed.
Sounds terrible.
Which is like, all right, so you're like looking for the numbers up there, like 300, 400, 200, and Brian's like, all right, hard brake 300. It's like, okay. Okay, I'll brake. And the Type-S is just such a really, really great partner for that too. Like, it's 600 horsepower, which is a lot more than the regular NSX. It's really impressive how much they did to actually improve the Type-S over the standard NSX. They gave it a whole engine refresh, bigger turbos, new fuel injectors, new tune, and then they actually went at the electric system as well. They upgraded the battery. They changed the gearing of the motors so it launches harder. It's the actual torque vectoring as you're coming off the corners is stronger. It's a really a whole car package. And while I only had basically 1.5 laps of at speed at Daytona, you could tell that it was a properly better, like a real improvement over the NSX previously. And honestly, when I was chatting with James as we were going back and forth with edits yesterday, we sort of came to the conclusion that, hey, this was sort of the NSX that Acura should have built to start with, because it's more emotional in in ways that it needed to be, in that it makes better sound. They retuned the intake and the actual exhaust sound that gets piped into the cabin, which is one of the biggest complaints of this thing. It's quicker, which is, when you call it a supercar, a lot of supercars these days are, they're 0 to 60 in the mid twos. And while Acura doesn't give an official 0 to 60, this definitely, it feels like it's closer to that figure. And man, it just looks more exotic. That front end itself is a lot more aggressive and a lot more supercar-like. I wouldn't necessarily say it goes into the Lamborghini section of wildness, but it definitely makes more of a statement when you're looking at it. And yeah, it just overall, the whole car package is more hardcore, more supercar-like. And yeah, it's a serious blast at Daytona, and it's something that I will not soon forget, being able to do that.
I'm really impressed with the amount of development they put into this car for its send-off.
Yeah,
it seems like a lot of effort for a car that's in its last iteration. But of course, a lot of that development they'll use in other cars, but a lot of the stuff is unique to the NSX, and then that's going to be it. And I'm really, really sad that I will probably never get to drive the Type-S. It's very limited and very, very exclusive. And you're not going to see a lot of them. What are they making?
They're making 350 total, 300 for the US.
Yeah.
And yeah, wow. It really shocked me too, how much they actually put into this for the final year of production. Because this is it. After the Type-S goes out, the NSX is done. They've done all this and made such a fantastic car, and now it's just gonna go away. And it's really sad, because it's really, really good. I don't know. I'm hoping that Acura, while they are all sold out, they will sort of just be ceremonial drives for us if we do get to drive it again on the road.
Yeah, hopefully.
Man, I really hope that we are able to, because I think it's really going to shine.
I actually will totally, I'll just echo those thoughts about, I can't believe this is like the send-off for the car. Usually the send-off for the car is more like, the Land Cruiser Final Edition, where it's like you get a script badge, some script things on the seats, and gold wheels, and that's it. This is to me, is a very credible, almost refresh of the car.
Yeah.
To me, it's you could do this, then keep the existing NSX, which in my opinion, I wrote this a couple years ago. It's almost like the cerebral supercar. So I could almost see that being more like the entry level one, and then make this more just have a two-pronged strategy, a pincer movement, if you will. I think that could really work for them. They also could have played this as again, the mid-cycle refresh or the new generation even. Mm-hmm. New generations of supercars oftentimes are not as much as even this is. It'll be we did this, this, and this. And you're it looks the same. And, it's the same chassis. And you gave us 50 more horsepower. Yeah, this is a new generation. Sure, whatever, right? But, this to me, I think is significant enough. And, I'm psyched about it. So I almost, part of me wonders if maybe, you remember with the Ford GT, it was only going to be a set number for a set number of model years, and then they found a way to kind of extend it. Maybe they can do that here, because I feel there actually might be a little more of an appetite for this. I realize the NSX commercially probably didn't do quite as much as they might have hoped it would have done.
Right.
With the supercar, that's always tricky.
It was always one of the most discounted vehicles over the past couple of years, too.
Yeah, they sold in the low triple digits pretty much every single year for the past few years here, even with the sizable refresh for 2019. And it's a really good point you make there, Greg, because honestly, I don't know, maybe it has something to do with the fact that we're short on cars out there, but Acura might have really underestimated what the actual demand for this is out there.
Yeah, I think maybe they did underestimate the the demand out there. I mean, just selling it out so quickly. I don't. In some ways, I think Acura is a niche brand for sure, but they do have a fair amount of crossover appeal. So, I guess we'll see. I think it's definitely one of the more interesting cars I've driven in the last couple of years here. I actually drove it right when the pandemic, like back in like April 2020, we were still in like lockdown. And I remember I had to kind of carve out this like route where I could drive it, because at the time it was something like, you probably remember this, John, you could only go certain places. There was like a thing, like you couldn't just like go to the store. It was like you had to be going to get essential things or something. Mm-hmm. And you could even be sort of like theoretically, I think, stopped. I mean, nobody was probably ever stopped. No. But I remember thinking, okay, so I'm going to drive around in this like bright blue NSX. Okay, that's my job. Got to do it. It's going to be fun. I can't wait to do this. But I'm like, I'm stopped. What are they going to say to me? What are you doing, sir?
Trying to fly under the radar a little bit.
Right, 6-figure supercar. And it also actually had, Zach was talking about the electric mode. It actually has, like, it can coast a little bit, is how I would put it, electrically. And I came around a corner and I had just been like, really, it was like a neighborhood going slow. And it just seemed like the engine must have kicked off or something. And I just literally came upon this biker and he just was like blown away. He was like, where did you come from? What is this car? How did you come up behind me silently? So that was kind of cool. To kind of go back to just driving on the track there, you got to do it at night. That is, to me, almost like a bucket list type of thing. I mean, what was that? You had Ryan Everly kind of, chauffeuring you at the start of it. I mean, that's got to be pretty awesome. And any other thoughts on the car?
Yeah, man. Driving at night was honestly one of the weirdest things, because I had never been on a track at night before. So this was a totally new experience. And so you're sort of very limited in like what you can see to like just the racetrack itself, because the lights don't necessarily light up the whole infield, the grass, the walls beyond there. So you're just sort of driving, on this track, and normally you can see forever. You can see way over there where you might crash into a wall, etc. But no, you couldn't really see a whole lot of that when you're driving at night. But it's really cool. And honestly, driving the NSX was one of the more reassuring things out there. Despite it having 600 horsepower, the NSX is honestly one of the easiest to drive supercars out there, maybe the easiest, because of its super secure SH all-wheel drive system. That torque vectoring will just yank you around corners. You can pretty much drive it like an idiot, and you can still drive really, really well. And the epic visibility that the NSX has had, honestly, from the start. They put such an emphasis on very small pillars, great viewing over the hood. All of those things, honestly, made driving at night a lot easier than it probably should have been. When you look at what the guys who did it just hours after me, they were looking out of basically a letterbox and filled with bugs, debris, dirt thrown everywhere. It's just incredible what they did over those 24 hours. And just to have a very, very small taste of that, it was special. Very, very special.
Very cool. Well, I do hope that at least one of us, John or I, gets to drive the Type-S NSX. I hope it's me, actually. But, hey, pretty excited about that car. So let's tee up our long-termer. This is the 330e. It arrived in our fleet, your fleet specifically, last month. Replaces the long-term TLX A-Spec / Type-S, which we'll probably write the epilogue for that one another time. But just put simply, that car is gone. We have a new sports sedan. Excited. It's electrified version of the 3 Series. I think that's cool. A hybrid, I should clarify. I'm excited. Just, why don't you just tee it up? What do we have? What are we going to be enjoying?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a 2022 BMW 330e xDrive. So 330e, that means it's the plug-in hybrid. So it has a 12 kilowatt hour battery pack that gives us about 20 miles of range. That's what the EPA rating is for the xDrive all-wheel drive version of it. Ours is in a pretty shade of Portimao blue, and it's relatively lightly optioned. So it comes out to about $52,000, which versus a lot of 3 Series that we've driven in the past is honestly relatively affordable. Those can get up into the low to mid $60,000 range pretty quickly. No, so that powertrain that you get with a 330e, it consists of a 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder that isn't quite as potent as the normal 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder that you get in the 330i. It's 181 horsepower, but when you combine it with the electric motor that the power comes from that battery pack, you get a combined output of 288 horsepower and 310 pound-feet of torque, which in and of itself is pretty potent. And the 0 to 60 time is actually right about on par, if not a little quicker than just a standard 330i, which is pretty cool when you look at it. When you buy this plug-in hybrid, it's actually just a little bit more performance than the gas-only one. So I find that very interesting. Other important things to know about the car: it does not have the M adaptive suspension. So we didn't get the adaptive Sport M everything on that. So it doesn't have the super wide wheels and tires. It doesn't have the very sporty suspension, but it does have the M Sport brakes. So we'll have that to look forward to. Should be some extra good braking capability versus the standard car. And beyond that, though, it has some good winter options. Has heated steering wheel, heated seats all around, which is nice. I've been driving it around now for the last 2 weeks since it's been in my driveway. I've actually just been getting through the break-in period. It's kind of funny. This, like every BMW I've learned ever since reading this owner's manual, has a 1,200 mile break-in period, which is a little longer than most new cars. But we're just about at that point to finally unleash it and see what it can properly do. And just as we're about to do that, here we are with this massive snowfall. But no, we'll actually be able to get some good winter impressions with it too soon, because we're going to get some Nokian R5, some Hakkapeliitta R5 winter tires on it here shortly, which is a new winter tire that actually isn't even for sale yet. They're shipping directly from Nokian's factory. So that's a super cool thing that we'll have to give some impressions on soon as well. I don't know if you guys have any questions. I can probably answer them about the car, since I've been chilling with it here for the past 2 weeks. So,
what was the sticker on it again?
$52,000.
All right,
sounds pretty good to me.
Yeah,
yeah, and keep in mind that this gets not the full $7,500 federal tax credit, but looking it up, $5,836 back you can get. So that's
like what, 47 for a 3 Series? That's a plug-in hybrid. That sounds like a pretty damn good deal to me, actually.
Yeah, not bad. Not bad. It's pretty compelling, at least on paper.
No, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I thought the same thing when I had an X3 plug-in hybrid last year. It was like, why would you buy the normal gas version when you can just get the plug-in hybrid that has the same performance? And after the tax credit, it's actually cheaper than the normal one, which it's really, really remarkable what you can get there.
So we got the sport brakes, but not the sport suspension. Is that right?
Exactly. Yes.
Okay.
It does not have the adaptive M Sport suspension on it. So standard suspension, I think it's sort of middle of the road right now. It's not as soft as that adaptive M Sport suspension is in comfort mode, but it's also not as stiff as it is when you turn normal BMW up to its Sport Plus suspension setting. It's sort of like a good middle of the road. Still super agile, seems to handle pretty well. but it does not have that adjustability that we see with a lot of BMWs.
I think I would rather have the suspension than the brakes, but I don't even know if that's an option, a way you can spec it. But no, I mean, this sounds pretty good. Looking forward to just, for me, the 3 Series is always about obviously how it handles the steering. Having a plug-in hybrid variant of that, I think, for me, makes the powertrain just a little bit more interesting. I think that adds a nice layer to it. In case anybody's wondering, they haven't seen a 3 Series lately. This does not have the large grille. Okay, we probably should clear that up right away. It's just the regular grille.
Yes, it is, and it looks good, I think.
Yeah.
One of I guess one big thing that has stood out to me so far is just how very smooth the engine and electric system mate with each other, in that it is a very, very seamless transition. Anytime you go from electric to gas back to electric, you hardly even notice. Like, the other night, the engine came on just while I was cruising down the highway. You wouldn't even know. Like, I had no idea, other than the fact that it actually gave an indication in the cluster that the engine was now running, which is really, really great. And if we think back to our Volvo S60 T8, it's in stark contrast to that, in that you could always tell when that engine came on. It was a bit gruff and rough and made a good amount of noise, but this BMW electric system is really, really quite something, and how smooth and nicely they've tuned it. So hopefully that remains that way throughout our whole test.
You were mentioning that this car in some ways had to be cheaper if you get the tax credit than the base, 3 Series. I think it's also, without having driven it, I'm expecting it to be a little more compelling than the base car. And then for me, perhaps as an enthusiast, and also somebody who's interested in the electrified side of things, it's a tough call between this and then the inline 6, with some of the higher powered 3 Series. For all the things this car can do, again, it's a plug-in hybrid. That to me really stands in its favor. But then you just go back to it's a straight 6 BMW 3 Series. Well, I don't know. That's just tough to top right there too. So, more money for that M340i, but you will get no arguments from me. That inline 6 is something special out there that the BMW has right now. It is a magical engine. 382 horsepower, 369 pound-feet of torque. That's there's a lot to like there.
Smooth as can be too. Such a silky engine.
I love the i6 format.
Yeah,
I've most i6s I've driven. I've really enjoyed
100%.
the Mercedes i6 with the electric turbocharger is also fantastic.
It's a throwback engine. You don't see too many of them, and when you do, they tend to be in something that's something special. And there's a reason for that engine to be under the hood. So BMW and Mercedes are, the two who are kind of leaning into it, and I think that's great.
They're really coming back too, in that you can get an inline 6 in a Land Rover these days.
Forgot about that one. Yeah.
You can get that. Supposedly Jeep's going to have an inline 6 engine here soon.
Right.
Yeah. Which is cool, because I had an i6 in my 99 Cherokee.
Yeah, exactly.
Was that the 4-liter beast that ran forever? Is that what I'm thinking of?
I'm sorry, what?
Was that the 4-liter beast of an engine that ran forever? I don't remember what that engine.
4-liter? I don't think it was 4 liters.
Mixing up my Jeep
it's been so long. It's been so long, but I just remember it had. I think it was.
There was a 4-liter inline 6. I don't know if that was it, but that was one of them. It was there's actually features on this engine out there. They used it for so long. It might have been an American Motors engine even, which we'll get to that in a bit. Cool. Well, I'm excited.
I think you're right about the. I think you're right about the 4-liter.
Okay.
I think you might be right.
All right.
But I remember it was torquey as heck. It made the car feel fast, especially when I was, it was my second vehicle. Yeah, that was a special vehicle.
Speaking of SUVs, let's transition over to the Explorer Timberline. I think back up, what is an Explorer Timberline? I'm wearing a plaid shirt. This seems like something I would wear in an Explorer Timberline. What is this thing?
So basically, it's an off-road-ish version of the Explorer. It's got about 0.8 of an inch higher ride height. It's got big Bridgestone Dueler all-terrains. Improved angle of approach, angle of departure. Has a retuned version of the Explorer Interceptor's cop shocks, tuned for off-road, with some other stuff. It's got a Torsen rear LSD, and it's got the extra terrain modes, and then it's got a lot of really cool looking touches. It's got these cool mountain badges on the C-pillars, on the liftgate. Then they sneak them in Jeep style on the rims, and then inside it's got these I forget what they call their faux leather ActiveX seats with these cloth inserts that look really nice, and they feel really nice. They're very comfortable seats. And yeah, it's just sort of meant to get you a little further than any other Explorer can off the beaten path. I mean, it's no Bronco, of course, but it also is far more comfortable to drive than the Bronco. It doesn't really give up a lot of that daily usability and on-road comfort with those bigger tires and the suspension. It's pretty well sorted out. And honestly, I had trouble caring about the Explorer in general. The ST is sort of interesting, but this is, what I'd want from an Explorer. I want something that is a little more rugged, especially around here in the winter. And but yeah, it looks cool. It has this neat green metallic exterior paint that's sort of dark and broody, and then the interior has sort of similar green upholstery. And I really enjoyed driving it. I was surprised at how well sorted out the suspension was. It didn't, not a lot of squat and dive, not a ton of body roll. There wasn't a ton of road noise from the tires, which I was pleasantly surprised about. The only engine is the 2.3 liter EcoBoost, so 300 horsepower, 310 pound-feet, which is quick enough. You can't get the six cylinder in it from the ST with that has like 400 horsepower. But I thought the 2.3 liter was perfectly fine. Paired with the 10-speed auto, it sort of kept it in the right gear all the time. It was really drivable and really comfortable, and it just looks really sweet too. And I took it on some of the back roads, the snowy, cratered, loose gravel, sometimes no gravel, just dirt roads around here, and it holds up really well. It can fly down those roads comfortably, and it feels very stable. And I would be happy to live with this, in a Michigan winter, which was where I was driving it. It was very comfortable. You still get the driver assistance tech and all that stuff, and it's just more comfortable to drive than the Bronco. I mean, it can't do all the Bronco stuff, but it can do some of it. It can do a fair amount of it, and it just does it more comfortably. And with its own unique styling.
Going through the Explorer lineup, I think this would be the one I might go for. A little more just rugged and, some of the things it could do as opposed to, say, the ST. That's just my call. What do you think, Zach?
Yeah, it just has me thinking like this sort of like very entry level, like off-road type trim thing is really taken off. And that you have the Timberline. There's going to be more Timberlines. Subaru has the Wilderness trim now for its cars. There's a RAV4 TRD off-road, and that there's more and more automakers going at this sort of like half on-road, half off-road type trim thing. And so far most of them seem to be pretty good, at least from what I've heard. Everybody has liked them, and it almost sounds like a future comparison test in the making.
Yeah.
Sort of like the medium spicy hatch, proverbial hot hatch we always talk about doing, like a hatchback that's pretty, you can, throw it around, but it's not crazy powered. It's like just enough to kind of have fun with. And that seems like the vibe with these vehicles. Plus, I think people like the idea of an off-road vehicle, whether they need it or not, so this kind of practically satisfies that kind of need. We'll see. I mean, I think it's going to be more and more common. GMC has the AT4, which has a little bit of capability to it, actually. And, there's more of them out there. So,
yeah, absolutely.
All right. So let's briefly touch on the Sorento Hybrid. This is, it's sort of like, I would say, it's almost like to me, this is like the democratization of hybrid technology. Because it's a normal Sorento in every way. It's a front-wheel drive vehicle. The one I tested, I think it was the EX trim. So pretty, just normal crossover. Had 3 rows, put my kid in it, put the dog in it, just totally normal. But it just happened to be a hybrid. And, in return for that deal, I was able to get, 37 miles per gallon combined, which this is a pretty big vehicle. Again, like I said, 3 rows. And, to me, I think that's sort of where we're going to see in the midterm. I think we might see a few more of these. I almost kind of wonder if cars like this, crossovers like this, might get lost in the shuffle with everybody going so hardcore into like the EV6, the Ioniq 5, just all these different things, an electric Equinox. Maybe vehicles like this you don't see automakers necessarily invest in. I don't know. But I do think they're a very practical, like, midterm play. I drove this thing all over for the week I had it, put some serious miles on it, drained half a tank of gas, which in a hybrid is a fairly difficult thing to do unless you're really driving. You know what I mean? Like my footprint is, I'd say, relatively small these days. I run errands, I drop the kid off at school, do different things, but I mean, it's not like I'm taking long road trips at this moment. So for me to go through that much fuel is fairly significant. But it's a hybrid. It's a hybrid crossover that I think could be very practical for a lot of people because it is pretty fuel efficient. There's other things out there. I believe there's a plug-in hybrid Sorento. There is obviously the conventional Sorento. So this is just sort of like if you walk into the Kia dealership, say, hey, I want a hybrid. Well, that EV it's a little expensive. Oh, this 4-cylinder, maybe that's not exactly what I'm going for. Here's a hybrid. Okay, I could get into that. And it's otherwise a very normal car, which I think is the idea. Other random thoughts, it was not particularly good in the snow because it was front-wheel drive and it was on these like, I don't know if they were low rolling tires or whatever they were, but I was all over the place on this thing. Let me put it that way. It's a good sized vehicle that's front wheel drive that is wearing, all seasons that were more like maybe 3-season tires is how I would put it. But otherwise, it's the right crossover for somebody. A little bit of a cliche here, but interior was okay. It's got some of those like kind of Kia touches, like the bezeled inserts and stuff like that in the dash, comfy seats, very, just a Sorento straight out of central casting that happened to be a hybrid. And I think that's the idea. So.
Yeah, the new generation of Sorrento is, in my opinion, a huge improvement over past generations. And I don't know, I haven't driven the hybrid, but I'm curious to drive it. It's really interesting when automakers make an economical gas only engine, and then a hybrid, and then a plug-in hybrid that may or may not get a rebate. I feel like, yeah, like you said, the hybrid itself could sort of get lost in the shuffle, which is fine. I'm curious to see how the sales shake out for the different Sorrentos, but I feel like most people would either go all gas, or if you're going to go hybrid, might as well go plug-in hybrid. But I don't know. We'll see what happens.
It almost seems like if you walked into the dealer and couldn't get the all electric or the electric one, and this was there, you might say, sure, okay, this price is pretty okay. Go with that. So,
and yeah, the fuel economy is pretty good. I mean, that's impressive.
For a 3-row crossover, that's really, really big fuel economy. I know we're mostly getting with our Palisade low 20s. If you can get mid to high 30s, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's like 10 mpg better than the other Sorrentos, and you can, that's significant savings over the course of a year or two. So yeah, I guess maybe that could be, and if you aren't ready to take the plunge into something with a plug, if you maybe don't have a place to plug your car in, yeah, sure. Yeah, I guess that makes sense.
And I mean, the starting price is, the MSRP is about 34. So when you think about it, a 3-row crossover that you could walk off the lot for about 34, destination, trim and all that stuff adds up a little bit. So let's just say mid to maybe even upper 30s once you're actually leaving the dealer. You get 37 miles per gallon. I mean, that's kind of remarkable when you actually step back and think about it. And you don't have to, there's no range anxiety. There's nothing. It's just, it's a normal Kia. It's a little, like I said, cliched to be talking about, we try to amplify cars and how they're interesting. The fact that this is boring is actually remarkable, and I think that's, somewhere David E is probably cringing, no boring cars, but I think it's good that this one's boring,
Yeah, I can see that. It's
David E cringing or the car being boring or both?
No, but yeah, I think you're right. Some people don't. I mean, they just want something with space that they can get their family and their stuff around comfortably and efficiently. And the Sorento Hybrid will do that. But then it's got all the good Kia stuff. It's got that great infotainment system. All the available tech is great, and then the warranty, the 5-year. 60,000 mile warranty that Kia offers is pretty outstanding. That's a huge benefit. So it could, if you're more practical than emotional, it might be the right car.
Let's run through some news here. We'll go back to Alfa Romeo, which tends to actually make its hay, if you will, on emotional designs and, frankly, maybe not being the rational choice, but they're going to roll out the Alfa Romeo Tonale, or they're going to reveal it, coming up on February 8th. So if you're listening to this over the weekend, podcasters, come back next week. We'll have all the details on this crossover. We think it's going to be kind of sort of Jeep-based, although perhaps modified somewhere in there, as all platforms are modified. It'll probably be pretty good looking. Really, Alfa Romeo needs some new product, in my opinion, and this could definitely help shore things up. In the crossover side of things. I mean, I don't know. You guys, what do you guys think? I mean, Alfa Romeo tends to be either love it or don't care about it. You don't care about it enough to hate it. Let me put it that way. The Giulia, I think, is one of the cars that if I needed to buy a car, I would go look at that. So, they definitely capture my attention with, that one product. But what else they got, right? So, the Tonale, so I think hopes to kind of answer that question.
Yeah. I'm sort of optimistic about this thing. Both the Giulia and the Stelvio are on Alfa's own platform. They built that from the ground up, and they're both some of the best handling, most fun things to drive in their segment. If this Tonale can keep that going, then I'm super excited about it, because it's a very small crossover. It'll compete with other small crossovers. And if we can have something that's legitimately fun to drive in that segment, I think that's a huge plus. And I think that adding Alfa Romeo style into it is also going to be a huge plus for me as well, because I really, really love the way that modern Alfas look. So I'm cautiously optimistic at this point. I think we'll be able to see more in about a week once it's revealed. So yeah, I think
the Alfa Romeo looks, the Alfa Romeo name and badge and their unique styling is one of the big selling points for this, before even seeing the final product. I'm also interested. They're going to have a plug-in hybrid that they've been working on that system for a good long while. So that could be cool too. I'm one of the people who's sort of lukewarm on the Alphas I've driven, and I imagine that'll be the case here. But I hope to be pleasantly surprised, and maybe I'll fall in love.
So let's go right back over to a somewhat similar car. This is a crossover from Aston Martin, the DBX707. What a name. Aston is calling it a saber in a segment of sledgehammers. Man, the PR guy earned his money for that line, or a marketing person. That's awesome. I like that idea. The saber sounds good.
Yeah.
Sure, I'm willing to give it a shot. I think, in some ways, Alfa is doing a good job of really differentiating their crossovers from the rest of their lineup, but still maintaining that kind of Aston ethos. This is one another crossover I'm more than willing to be excited about. It's got a Mercedes engine under the hood, crazy horsepower. Yeah, it's coming up.
Yeah. The name is a little weird in that, it's a little weird. It's the 707, and that's 707 in metric horsepower. It won't make a lot of sense in the US because that equated to our horsepower ratings is 697 horsepower. So you'll be constantly explaining to people at your bougie Cars and Coffees that no, your car doesn't have 707 horsepower. It has 697 horsepower.
How embarrassing, right?
Embarrassing. Just downright embarrassing.
You spent go park it on the other side of the street.
$235,000 on this car. It doesn't even have over 700 horsepower.
Get it for 50 in a Hellcat. Come on, guys.
Exactly. But no, I guess the big draw that you'll have, until somebody comes up with something even more powerful, is that this will be the fastest SUV crossover in the world. And that's what Aston is claiming. It'll beat the Bentayga speed, which currently, I guess it's like half a mile per hour quicker than the Urus to its top speed. But this will best it by, I think, about 3 miles per hour. So you get Autobahn bragging rights. And you also have, well, it's not over 700. It is better than the Urus and better than the Bentayga speed and even better than the Cayenne Turbo SE hybrid as far as horsepower. Yeah. So you have all of those bragging rights. And from what I've heard about people driving the DBX is that they absolutely love the way it drives. And this is probably just going to be even better than that. So, yeehaw. DBX707.
I'm going to have to go back and revise my list of most powerful crossovers. And I'm happy to do that. To do that as often as possible. Keep giving us more powerful crossovers. I would like some of them to be, electric, but but yeah, this thing is, Aston Martin, along with the superlative of being the fastest, is, I think, money maker right there. You're not going to see them around either. It's going to be a super rare car, super interesting. But yeah, definitely one that you'll want to keep an eye out for at Cars and Coffee.
I drove a DBX last spring. It certainly got some attention. Let's put it that way. It was not the DBX 707, if you will, but yeah. I think the conclusion I came to is that they did a really good job translating Aston into a crossover. So we'll see where they go from here. I think it's just tough because if, like, say you do have a lot of money and you're like, what do I want to spend it on? Is this what you go with? I don't know. It's kind of hard to say.
I mean, if you want bragging rights, an SUV that goes up to 193 miles per hour is pretty stupendous.
It'll certainly be
true.
Rarer than if you get a Cayenne that is probably just as good performing on track too.
Mm-hmm.
If you want that rare factor.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of rare, my column this week, this is a really deep cut, guys. I did a little bit of a look back at the American Motors headquarters. So it's actually still standing right now. It has already been condemned, though. News came out last year that the city of Detroit is going to redevelop the site. It's a $5.9 million deal. They're going to, it sounds like, basically level it, then build a new industrial site. That's progress. It's been vacant for over 10 years at this point. You guys seem to be interested in it. It's our second highest clicker of the site. I wouldn't have thought a story about a building that's been empty for 12 years, about a company that hasn't existed in 34, would generate this interest. But I had a lot of fun kind of getting some archival images. I love those like roaring 20s shots of buildings that are in like black and white or kind of amber tones. Just they make the building look like something special, which when they were building those things back then, they were, we didn't have structures like this back then, up until that point in history, So, it's interesting. Give it a read. I guess I'll give it a plug there. The way I try to break it down is Chrysler. So when Chrysler merged with AMC back in the 80s, they just absorbed this building. And obviously Chrysler already had a headquarters. They didn't need this other one. So they use it as kind of like an engineering site for a while, surprisingly long time, up until basically bankruptcy. Then when they, started unloading real estate, they were like, yeah, we can't maintain this 100-year-old building. This is a great chance to get rid of it. They offloaded it to, it sounded like a developer who may have been didn't exactly state his intentions. It sounds like his intentions were essentially to loot and scrap the place. And that's where things got kind of sideways. I kind of left that out of my story just because I didn't have all the things, but reading some of just like the local media coverage, that's kind of what happened. Because I was a little surprised that it went from an actual engineering center for Chrysler to basically a ruin pretty quickly, So, just an interesting kind of backstory. It is still standing if you're in the metro area and, you're on Plymouth Road. It's something to drive by and look at. That's kind of how it piqued my interest is years ago when it was still in operation. I drove by it and I was like, what is this? Like, it looks like one of those like almost town halls that you might see from, again, the early 20th century. It's a really nice looking building. And, every now and then I might pass by there if I was like, taking a shortcut or something. And then the news came out last month or end of last year, actually. It was the very end of December that they're going to redevelop it. I think that's progress. That's kind of where you got to go. Yeah. There was a chance to maybe redevelop it 10 years ago. That passed. So we'll see.
I'll have to go drive by it before it gets torn down because it looks really cool. It's a very Detroit style building. You see a lot of buildings like this that come out of nowhere. And a lot of them are schools. A lot of schools around Detroit look just like this. But yeah, it's very, very much a very Detroit building. And where did you say it was in the city?
So it's on the west side.
Okay.
Plymouth Road. I'd have to look up the north and south cross streets, but yeah, pretty kind of midway actually between like Ann Arbor and then downtown itself.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, kind of northwest actually. Interesting piece of architecture. It's in some ways, before it fell into disrepair, it was like prettier than most automotive buildings you might see, Mm-hmm. The backstory, I think, is kind of interesting too, because it was originally a Kelvinator refrigerator factory. Okay. So then when they merged with Nash, remember Nash, the car company, they moved to this as their headquarters. And then when Nash merged with all those other companies and became American Motors, that's where this came from. So it's a little bit of one of the things I tried to hint at in my column is you might think this is the historic headquarters of plucky upstart American Motors. Yes and no. It was from the 50s to the 70s, but then they actually moved to Southfield. And I believe that headquarters is a charter bank now. It's pretty close to where our old offices were for a minute. So, from the 20s to the 50s, it was more or less like a refrigerator place.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where you can almost the narrative doesn't quite match up to what you might think it is, but it's still definitely historic. They did make helicopters there, Sikorsky helicopters at the end of World War II.
That's cool.
So there's more than enough history. Let me put it that way. If you asked me, all things being equal, should they save it? The answer would be, I think yes. But this one kind of falls on the other side of the ledger, given its current state and what they can do with it.
It's a shame.
Managing editor Greg Reza was saying it'd be great if they could save the facade or something.
Yeah.
Which I know is kind of a controversial practice in architectural circles, because you're really tearing down the building but keeping one wall. Mm-hmm. I think that'd be kind of cool, right?
Yeah, they've done that on campus here, and I think it looks it's a nice little reminder of what we used to see there, and especially when a building is very iconic and has so much history, you want to somehow preserve some of that, in some way.
The more of these old style Detroit buildings we can save, I think the better. I really love what Ford has been doing with the old train station.
Yeah,
stuff like that is
saved,
so cool. And yeah, I'm with you, Greg. Saving this, I'm absolutely for.
Sounds good. And that's all the time we have this week on the Autoblog Podcast. Thanks for listening. Send us your questions, your mailbags, your spend my monies. That's podcast@autoblog.com. Hope you're being safe from the winter storm. By the time you listen to this, it'll probably be 70 degrees and sunny wherever you are. Be safe out there. We'll see you next time.